Our next topic is Sky High Solutions, how drones are improving municipalities. Again, we have two speakers. We have Denean Tomlin and Amy Smith. Denean Tomlin is the VP and ITB manager at Arcfield Canada. She is responsible for leading the industrial and technological benefits, the ITB strategy of that organization. She acts as the primary ITB customer interface and supports the successful fulfillment of Arcfield Canada's ITB obligations. She's responsible for managing the reporting for industrial and regional benefits obligations on existing defense and security sector projects, and for leading the development of the company's Canadian value proposition and industrial technological. I'm kind of looking at your business card. Anyway, a lot of the obligations of the company there, the strategy and the commitments. She is also a member of the company's business development capture teams, leading the VP ITB related program development activities. She's been home in Calgary since 1989, although initially from British Columbia. Her career spans 3 decades in areas of business development, government relations, economic development, and international trade and investment. Prior to joining Arcfield, Denean spent 10 years supporting the aerospace and defense industries as president of the Western Canadian Defense Industries Association. And on this side, taking this podium, will be Amy Smith. And Amy is the Business Development Manager for Aerospace and Logistics with Calgary Economic Development. Amy works with business, government, post-secondaries, and community partners to position Calgary as a location of choice to invest and do business for the purpose of building a more diverse and prosperous city. She has a passion for supporting the aerospace sector and telling Calgary's story. She looks forward to making connections and advancing economic opportunities to build a stronger community. Amy is an active volunteer with Calgary Stampede. I was a Stampede band member, never mind, and enjoys traveling and spending her weekends skiing in the mountains. And again, the topic is how drones are improving municipalities. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
This is YYC, an airport that moves more cargo and people than almost anywhere in Canada. Right next door is WestJet HQ. Humbly established in '96, WestJet's become a big player among airlines in North America. And with those two entities thriving, it's only natural that the aerospace industry in Calgary would end up exactly where it is today, a global powerhouse. This city's now home to a massive amount of industry expertise, from multinational defense companies like Raytheon Technologies, Lockheed Martin, or General Dynamics, to companies like Flight, who are making it possible to stream real-time data from aircrafts to ground crews, making air traffic safer and more efficient. And hey, when you hear about NASA or SpaceX making a little trip up into space, they're using control rooms manufactured in Calgary by Evans Consoles. Aerospace companies love Calgary because it's a research and development dream. It's a living lab that provides support and public space for innovators to come in and do their thing. For example, across North America, it was impossible to mass test commercial drones in a major city. Not here. We were the first. Maybe why we're now home to Sky Census, a 5-year collab between 3 Alberta companies and Paraton Canada, and they're dedicated to making unmanned aerial vehicle flight beyond visual line of sight a regular, routine, everyday kind of thing. And it's working. These advances are major, benefiting everything from public safety to pizza delivery, seriously. And when it comes to education in aerospace, take your pick. Our main post-secondary institutes all offer aviation studies. Notably, SAIT's become a leader in UAV education, while the U of C is the first school in Western Canada offering a minor in aerospace engineering. This is a city where good people, companies, and ideas can and will become great. Engineers, pilots, technicians, programmers, entrepreneurs. If aerospace is your thing, then Calgary is definitely your city. Be part of the energy.
I'd like to thank Amy and the team at Calgary Economic Development for putting that together, and Arcfield was Paraton. So it's the same project we're going to talk about today, but of course the company name has changed. So thank you, everybody. Good morning, and to those of you online, thank you for joining. I know that we are really excited, Amy and I, to present today, and what a fabulous opportunity to follow the guys from the Edmonton Airport, because it was a lot of what they said that we're going to be able to launch from and share with you some of the ideas and an exciting project we have going on.
Thanks, Denean, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm Amy Smith. from Calgary Economic Development, and I'm so excited to be here today to support Denean in sharing more about the Sky Census project, how Calgary Economic Development has been involved, and how industry is working to advance beyond visual line of sight. And I don't think I've heard it yet today, but back in November when Calgary hosted the Aerial Evolution Conference, it became referenced numerous times throughout the day that BVLOS is the holy grail and really the next steps to advancing this, this path forward. So with that, some of our objectives that we wish to share with you today are to share VLOS to BVLOS. What is the difference and why does that matter to operations within municipalities? Denean will give a thorough overview of the municipalities project, a Sky Census initiative for RTM project deliverable for Transport Canada, and a capability demonstration that we're looking to host in Calgary in May. And then we'll review some examples of various uses in municipalities from a Calgary perspective, and then summarize with some economic opportunities for growth, both in an urban and rural environment. And then we'll conclude with hopefully some question and answers.
Well, questions, I'm not sure if we're going to have the answers, but we're going to try. All right, so because we know it's a mixed audience, what we really wanted to do is make sure you're aware we're not technical. So we're going to cover this from a business perspective and from an opportunities perspective. And so the first thing to remind everybody is we all know that drones have been flying around. We know there's hobbyist drones. We know we can buy them and as mentioned, put them up in the backyard. We know they've been operating commercially visual line of sight for some time, and as noted, we have some BVLOS operations that have been happening in Canada for special applications. So what we are talking about today is taking the world of RPAS to municipalities, utilizing beyond visual line of sight and utilizing that as an economic driver. So as mentioned, the regulations don't currently exist for beyond visual line of sight. So the project we're going to talk about and the activities with the Sky Census team that we put together are really pushing those boundaries and informing the regulator about the things that we need to consider for regulations and the ability to do that in environments such as municipalities. Of course, we're talking about certifications and approvals because when it comes to operating drones beyond visual line of sight, the certifications and the approvals required are going to be far different than those for the current VLOS operations. And then a couple of other things that I think is important to note is that we really want to line up with the rules and activities that were set before us with manned aviation. And I know that, that Amy has some thoughts around that from a Calgary perspective.
Yeah, and what I wanted to share at this point of the presentation is really to encourage everyone to talk about what you hear today, because I do believe that there's a bit of an awareness gap from those of us many of us in the room today that work in this sector day to day, and to those that might be less familiar with these applications and drone usages. I think traditionally, when you talk about drones, many people that I engage with from the public sector are, you know, they naturally gravitate to recreational use. Think of a drone that you can buy in a box off the shelf at Best Buy, and use for, you know, videography, film, or photos, that sort of thing. So today, we really want to expand what that looks like and talk more about the sophisticated use of drones in not only defense applications, but now commercial use and even municipality usage.
All right, thank you, Amy. I've got so much on the slide I can barely read it, so I'm just gonna go with it. So the Municipalities Project, it is born out of this thing called Sky Census, and I know I'm talking this afternoon about ITBs, and I'm going to talk about how Sky Census was created as an ITB obligation, but just assuming that we put $15 million into 3 companies in Alberta to advance the state of BVLOS. What we've done is we're 3.5 years into it. We have advanced a bunch of areas, and we've had to prove through demonstrations, and each of the companies have had to go and prove their ability and their capability. And what we came to was, if we put this all together, what would be a really good demonstration for operations and detect and avoid? And we had the opportunity to speak to Transport Canada as one of the members of the RTM project. And there were two companies or two project teams chosen, and we were fortunately one of them. And so we've been working with Transport Canada, and we have come to a point where we suggested a demonstration. And so we presented that in a tabletop exercise. And now we are taking the tabletop to real time, and we are wanting to do it in the city of Calgary. So we are taking the demonstration concept and the tabletop exercise, and we're moving it to the northwest of Calgary, and we are going to operate in May, if all things go perfectly well. We're going to operate in a real-time environment with the detect and avoid capabilities that we've developed, and with the operators and their experience and their expertise, put all the pedigrees together and prove something that hasn't been done before in Canada. So, Amy, do you want to talk a little bit about our project and what we've approached Calgary Economic Development to help us with?
Yeah, so Calgary Economic Development is super excited about the opportunity to support the project and really share the added value and benefit back to the city of Calgary. So it's really important. I want to take the opportunity today to thank the different stakeholders and partners that we've worked with to date. Many departments within the city of Calgary, particularly the Living Labs program. And if those of you that aren't familiar, the City of Calgary hosts a Living Labs program that enables companies to leverage City of Calgary infrastructure and owned assets to test and validate your technologies. And this is cross-sectoral, but they also have a drone site that you can operate your drone within City of Calgary limits. But I just want to give a shout out to Bassem Dawoud, who's leading that Living Labs program right now. And we've also worked with Monique Nessick and her team within Smart Cities Calgary. Like I said before, various departments, wildlife, parks, rec, and then we're looking also to engage Calgary emergency services, including police and fire, and really work together on this project. So again, really want to thank the City of Calgary and all the different departments. Another thing to note is we've also engaged communication with one of our councillors, and we hope to extend that to all the councillors. But we've started with the Councillor Sharp's office, where this particular project is going to be launched. So that's in Ward 1 and within the City of Calgary.
Got to give those shout outs for the people watching online, right? All right, so I have to mention, of course, the participants of Project Sky Census. Arkfield, as the defense prime with the obligation, invested in the ITB project. So Arkfield Canada leads it, and the companies, and you've heard some of them already, Arium Analytics, BVLOS Inc., which is also connected to the Foremost UAS test range, and Canadian UAVs. These are the companies that have come together to stretch the ability to work within a BVLOS environment. And independently, the two operator companies, Arium and Canadian UAVs, have established some fantastic demonstrations that have really stretched the boundaries. And so to speak a little bit about the project is we're going to set up, as Amy mentioned, up in the north, and we're gonna launch a drone, and it's gonna go beyond visual line of sight, and it's going to work in and around multiple classifications of airspace in the municipalities. We're proving the capability that we can work within this regulatory framework and within these restrictions. And we're doing it to prove the next step, which is to move to commercial viability, to work within the City of Calgary for safety and security support. So the demonstration is the first step to unlocking what comes after that. Amy, let's talk about municipalities and how we're going to use it in the City of Calgary.
Great. So as I mentioned before, as the industry looks to advance these technologies further, we need to continue to talk about it and share the positive impacts that drones can bring to our cities and respective regions. So while working with the city, it was extremely important to illustrate the why and how would this be advantageous and allow the uses of drones. So whether it be for surveying efforts, data collection, or emergency response efforts, I want to give a shout out to Roger as well for outlining just the various applications that drones can be leveraged. What we've decided to approach at the city and focus in on is on the emergency response. I think when you talk about increasing efficiencies, saving costs and saving lives, and quicker response times, this is something that the public can get behind and easy for entry into the market and adoption. So as we look to set up drone corridors within an urban environment, I think one of the first applications could be, like I said, for emergency response. And one of the examples we've previously talked about is if someone was in a remote area having an anaphylactic response and needs an EpiPen delivered, this is something that perhaps a drone could deliver to the site in a much more quick and efficient fashion. And then there are other added benefits as well that I touched on previously. The cost savings, if we're looking at leveraging the use of a drone as opposed to a helicopter to respond to an area, they might be able to access it quicker, more cost effectively, and of course there's a green angle as well with these electric drones.
Absolutely, and I think that from my perspective, when putting the idea of this demonstration together, we approached a number of cities, and Calgary is the first one to really step up, but there are 6 or 7 others. We have small communities with municipal airports that are looking at the same idea, but how it would apply to them. And so the ideas that Amy touched on, that Roger touched on this morning, whether it's supporting inspection of buildings, and that's taking the human out of the risk loop, whether it's the long linear, taking a look at flood zones, operating at night. We can send drones beyond visual line of sight and operate at night and observe and report on forest fires. We can send them out to support emergency first responders in threat and disaster response situations. These are all things we need to do and we can do, but we have to unlock the operations and the rules around BVLOS to be able to do it. And so we're really excited to be doing the first step here within Calgary. So the next thing we want to talk about is these economic opportunities for growth. I just touched on a couple of the different examples, and like I said, we have 7 municipalities and a couple of regions in the province of Alberta. So I'm really proud to say I think Alberta is going to lead the way, as we have, not surprisingly, in the RPAS growth. So I would like to think that we're going to be the first ones unlocking a lot of the BVLOS capabilities and seeing the economic opportunities as a result.
Thanks, Denean. And I was remiss to mention on the last slide, it's been touched on before, this isn't looking to necessarily replace people in their jobs, but to really change how we are doing these existing jobs safer. So I just wanted to touch on that before I talk about some of the economic growth opportunities. But I think just in supporting a project like Sky Census and this urban municipalities demonstration, it will look to attract other investment into the region as other companies look to do similar efforts within a city environment, or to have access to various regions and support the regional connectivity. So we do outline a couple examples here, but in terms of expansion of logistics and delivery companies, expansion of services, companies for data collection, imagery, inspection, etc., and support services to maintain the operations to the industry. And I also, before we go any further, I wanted to make sure we talked about Canadian UAVs having the first license to fly beyond visual line of sight. If you could share that.
Absolutely, absolutely. So to Amy's point, we need to really celebrate the work. Obviously, I'm biased because we're investing in those great companies, but Canadian UAVs was the first Canadian operator to have been granted a BVLOS operation certificate within a certain air class, but across Canada. And so they're the first one to be able to do that, and they're going to be the first of many. So it's exciting times, absolutely, and thank you for pointing that out. So with this slide, I want to reflect back on the previous presentation. And if you remember the visuals where Drone Delivery Canada had the CCAN and the landing pad and the fence, well, those are all economic growth opportunities too. Just because you're not an operations company doesn't mean you're not a service company, you're not a support company. As these skyways, as these corridors are created, there's going to be places where drones need to be serviced and hopefully they're assembled somewhere else, right? They're going to be taken from point A to point B. And so that entire infrastructure of the corridor is going to be an economic growth opportunity. And of course, there's all the companies in logistics and delivery that are going to be looking to expand their fleets. And then we're going to see, I think the point I've got here is that the order of approvals that I think we're going to see things is, of course, information and data collection, imagery and analysis. Then we're going to see packages being delivered, and then eventually people. And some of that is being tested and done today. And we just really need to unlock that into the municipalities to be able to realize some of those absolutely fabulous benefits. So just because you're not an operator doesn't mean there's not an opportunity for you to build and support the growth of this sector. So thank you very much. I hope that gives you a small snapshot into what we're working on. The Municipalities project is something that I'm interested in talking to other municipalities about. We are the defense company that's putting our capabilities forward, but it has spurred on an awful lot of questions about what we could do in other jurisdictions. So I'm always open to taking questions and helping direct, as is Roger's team and the great group that put this conference on. So I'd like to thank you, and I think we've got a few minutes for questions and answers.
I'm sure you can read that, but I'll read it aloud anyways. Thank you very much for that presentation. I'm curious which municipality, but it says our municipality has been developing a drone program for emergency response and emergency management. Does Calgary Fire Department do anything like this?
I have not had the opportunity as yet to interface with the Calgary Fire Department, so I'm not sure what they're working on, but we do have calls into our first responders in the city of Calgary to find out what they want to get involved in. I do know that first responders obviously are operating drones, but they're doing it VLOS, and we're talking about operations in a BVLOS environment.
I'm going to throw my own question in, and it's a little bit of exploration of the barriers that you're encountering and how you're overcoming the barriers to be successful and even doing the pilot projects.
Well, thank you for that question. There are a lot of barriers, so I'm not quite sure exactly which ones to talk about. I mean, the regulatory environment doesn't exist. We talked about education, and we talked about the risk environments, and all those things we have to overcome to operate. All of us are people on the ground, so there's a risk there. We have our homes, our businesses, our children, etc. So, we also don't want people peeking into what we're doing necessarily all the time. So there's a lot we have to overcome with public perception, and we have to work on that. There was a lot addressed already about the safety, security, the education, and the regulatory. I know I keep saying that, but we have to overcome that by proving that it can be done. And I believe, Steve, is it Transport Canada? It's the crawl, walk, run. That's their, right. So we're working in their crawl, walk, run framework to make sure that we can prove everything out over and over again before we're allowed to go ahead and do these things. And every time we do that, we unlock a new condition. So whether it is going to be in a rural or an urban environment, way up north, over water, over people, each one of those have different conditions we have to be prepared for.
Thank you. There are a couple more questions. Do you foresee the technology being utilized for bylaw enforcement and DOT inspection?
Yes, absolutely. First responders, no surprise to all of you, they're tasked overtasked right now. And so there's a number of things that can be done to support them. And so the bylaw and DOT fall under that as well. And I'm sure that they are going to find a way, some smart people out there are going to create something that can be put on a drone platform to be able to observe, report, and analyze things that are relevant to those particular areas of law enforcement.
Thank you. And there is another question. What role do you think other municipalities can play in the project as the projects develop?
That's a great question. So as I mentioned, I was really fortunate to have Amy come and talk about Calgary, because Calgary sat down and said, how can we do this? But I've been talking with the other ones, and so my contact information is there. Reach out to me. Let's talk about it. There is great interest to expand this because the conditions in each municipality change. And what's really important to each municipality is different. Obviously, what's important to the city of Calgary and what can be done there is different than if we were doing it in a small rural area. And maybe in that case, we would be supporting forestry or RCMP or some kind of other application that would enhance the municipality.
Thank you. Next question relates to barriers and social license again. How are you addressing the public approval with regard to not over my house, not in my backyard?
Right, and I would be one of those people too that would question it, right? So thankfully, unfortunately, I don't have to address that. We are going to address that within this project. Amy and I are working with the marketing communications teams of all of the stakeholders to ensure that we have good messaging out there. And I know in the November conference in Calgary, the Aerial Evolution Conference, it was the topic on at least 2 or 3 panels that this has to be considered and it has to be addressed, because what you don't know definitely scares you a lot of times. So yeah, so it is being addressed, but not by myself.
There is a question as well about liability and how you are managing the potential liability of the program should something go sideways.
Right. Also, very good question. The liability and the insurance is covered by the different stakeholders depending on their level of participation in the demonstration. So I would see going forward that obviously once BV loss within a municipalities or an environment such as that are operational, there's going to be some insurance opportunities in that in the growth of the industry as well.
Another question touches the perhaps lack of an existing regulatory framework. It talks about a municipality that has no current bylaws. And is that something that municipalities would need to start, or is it implementing now as it becomes a reality? Where would you suggest a municipality might want to dive in?
That's such a great question, because I'm learning as we're doing this as well and finding out who owns the air and who owns the ground and who can give access and rights to certain things. And so bylaws are really important because the drones have to start on the ground and they have to end on the ground. And so in order to operate, we need to understand what that implies. And then the bylaws within the municipalities have to consider what kind of interaction is going to take place. So I'm certainly not responsible for setting bylaws, but I do get to vote on them. So so I know that that people don't want things to be invasive, but for some reason, of course, overlooking that, they want everything to be easy, and they want, you know, pizza and coffee and diapers delivered to their door. So we're going to find a way.
Always the balance. And there's a question about support to other municipalities for BV loss with regard to emergency services and search and rescue. Are there outreach or connections or support that you can provide?
We're doing a demonstration project, so we don't have those services, but what I foresee is once those boundaries are overcome, that we're going to see companies providing those services. I know that that the first responders and the emergency services and the disaster response folks love the VLOS applications that they're currently using, and we've already had some great conversations about what the opportunities could be with BVLOS. So I hope there's companies out there that can make that connection and find an opportunity to help save lives and reduce risk and really make an opportunity of it.
Thank you. Well, it appears we have run the questions that are available on Slido. So I thank you both very much for your presentation and for the steps that you're taking with the City of Calgary and creating new opportunities for many other municipalities at the same time. Thank you both very much.